Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. Hope you've had a good week. We're kind of in that period now, aren't we, between the season ending, the internationals ending. It's a bit boring, it's a bit dull, it's become a bit repetitive. But now we are pretty close to pre-season beginning. I think that has been one thing that I came to a quick realisation was it wasn't a massive gap between the season ending and actually the pre-season getting going. And it has felt a little bit repetitive in terms of some of those stories, but today we do have quite a substantial one, an update over a transfer target that looks like it may be further down the line than we anticipated, and I think there is a lot of mixed reactions over this target in Raheem Sterling. So I want to spend today's episode just speaking about Sterling basically. I know there's been other reports out there, but this feels quite a concrete one, quite a big one to speak about, because if Chelsea were to get this deal over the line, I think it's a massive deal. I think it is a bit of a statement signing. I don't think it would be the only deal I'd want to see this summer, but it would be quite big, and I think it would raise some eyebrows. It really would. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, notification bell. Also hit the like button because it really helps new people find the channel. But this all started with Dimarzio out of Italy reporting this morning that Chelsea are confident of closing a deal for Raheem Sterling from Man City. And I think the most incredible thing about this report today, the transfer fee could be around 35 million for Sterling from Man City with only 1 year left on his contract. Then we had all of that kind of reaction and interest from it. Other reports from Sky claiming a deal will be closer to around 60 million, which is just, I think, over 10 million more than what Man City originally bought Sterling from Liverpool for. And then we had The Athletic this afternoon that Chelsea are growing in confidence that they can complete a deal for Man City for Raheem Sterling. Sterling, 27, is available for a cut price fee this summer as he only has 1 year left to run on his contract. It is understood that Sterling has been talking to people about what life is like at Chelsea and what Thomas Tuchel is like as a manager. And one source at the club believes the only stumbling block to a deal being completed is the size of the fee. The final thing I'm just going to reference on Football London, the site I work on, my colleague Scott Trotter did an interview and discussion with Alex Brotherton, who works basically writing on Man City. He's a Man City fan, Man City expert, about Sterling. And I think it's a really interesting one because if you are just someone who casually watches Man City and maybe has built up a perception of Raheem Sterling, I think you do need to listen to people who do watch these players on a regular basis and maybe would give you maybe a change of opinion, a different perspective on what Sterling could bring to Chelsea. But let's talk about Sterling. I have several bullet points that I've sort of written down here that I want to go through to not miss anything, because I don't just want to come on here despite my personal liking to the player and just act that like I did with Lukaku last summer, that nothing can go wrong. This is the dream signing. I think we should have learned a lot from what the Lukaku situation was and how it turned out and where Chelsea need to move on and really improve in a transfer window, which I think is what we all kind of want. I think that there's a general feeling that things have gone wrong for Chelsea in recent windows. We need to rectify them, particularly in the attacking area where we've spent so much and it hasn't quite worked out. So it can go wrong, absolutely. And that's the first bullet point. It can obviously go wrong. I think some people are pointing to the missed chances that Sterling has, the fact that he is very much a confidence player and he can go through spells where he is missing chances, pretty easy ones. I think we've seen that throughout his career. And particularly when you transfer that to a Chelsea team that isn't as creative as Man City and we don't get as many chances and we don't create as much. If Sterling is having a bad day in front of goal, it's going to become more costly for Chelsea than it probably would for Man City as well when you factor in all of the productive attackers Sterling has around him. So if he's having a bad day, there's usually someone else on City who's probably having a better day who are going to finish those chances. So there's that point. I think the second part, and this is, I've said this already, but I really want to emphasize this. I think it is relevant to whatever attacker we speak about as a potential target, whether it's Ousmane Dembele, Gabriel Jesus, Raheem Sterling, Nkunku, whoever you throw at me this summer. I think Thomas Tuchel needs to adapt. I think he needs to change. And I think there needs to be an appreciation of where Chelsea have been going wrong. Tuchel spoke about the attacking issues Chelsea had last season, but he kept on speaking about the missed chances, which sure is a problem, but I don't think in the underlying numbers it really backs up the theory that Chelsea's major problem is just missing chances. We just don't create enough opportunities. I think I've referenced this before. If you look on Understat, I think in the end, only Aston Villa and Leicester overperformed their XG more than Chelsea, which tells you that Chelsea are doing quite good in front of goal. We're just not creating a lot of opportunities, which makes, as I've already referenced, the chances we do miss within a game a lot more costly. And I think Chelsea and Tuchel's Chelsea needs to take more risks. Now, I don't just think that's about signing someone up top. I think maybe you look further back in the team, a defensive midfielder who can allow Chelsea to maybe go a little bit more risky, maybe in the final third, commit more men forward and know that there's going to be someone behind who's going to take up and eat up a lot of ground and be able to cover for those players moving forward, which Chelsea haven't had for so long. So I think there's that. Absolutely Tuchel. Just there needs to be a sense that the handbrake can be let off at times in games. Sure, against top teams, there needs to be that balance, and there's no problem with him using what has worked before. But I think particularly in games at home where we've been so poor against inferior opposition, there needs to be an adaptation where Chelsea can really go at teams a lot more. Because that's where Sterling would be coming from, a team that does the opposite to Chelsea, really does go at games a lot. And I also think there maybe is a flaw from us of looking for the guy, looking for this one player who's going to come in and be the saviour, which is what we thought Lukaku was last year. Now, whatever you say about Lukaku, his character, what's gone wrong, the interview, the behind-the-scenes friction, all of that stuff that's leading him now to the exit. I think what we know about Tuchel and what we're seeing more with the likes of Klopp and Guardiola is it's a team game, it's a squad game. And Tuchel likes to rotate. And the idea that one guy is going to come in, the individual is going to change things. I think the idea of the individual at the top level of the Premier League is not as important as it once was. You still have outstanding individuals in the Premier League who do change games, and I don't want to sort of demean that. Absolutely, individual quality could define the biggest of games. But just in a sense that there's a shared belief in the system over the individual. I think it links back to what Tuchel needs to do with his system next year to really get the best out of Chelsea and really get us moving forward in the Premier League. I do think those are the cons. It can go wrong. Sterling has had bad spells in his career. Chelsea's problems with creativity, particularly in the Premier League. I think on the plus side, and this is where I do want to bring up Sterling, stylistically, I think he does tick a lot of boxes that Chelsea have maybe got wrong in recent transfer windows. Firstly, Premier League proven, which I think continues to be undermined, but I think it does matter. You have someone who just understands the league. The most recent and best example I can give you is Ben Chilwell. Took him very little time to adapt to life at Chelsea. There is something to be said about that. And sometimes you are going to pay a premium, but I think sometimes that premium is worth it because you see the instant impact those players make on the team. And the problem is Chelsea have had the reverse of that, basically. They have had players who have come from a foreign league and not quite understood the Premier League, or their strengths in another league have dwindled in Chelsea's system, but also with what the Premier League offers and presents to attackers. I think Werner's the best example we have, and in a way Ziyech too has really struggled at times to adapt to the physicality of the Premier League and what it demands. So you've got a player who understands the league, has worked in the league for multiple years and shown that he can be productive in the league. Pressing, is used to a pressing system, is used to that fluidity of versatility of playing across the front line. He mostly has played on the left for City, but he can play off the right and be quite creative from that area too. And even at times for Pep, he's played as a 9. And as well, I think the possession is a big factor as well. He plays in a team that dominates the ball. I think that's another problem with some attackers Chelsea have bought, who are much used to counter-attacking transition football where they're running into space constantly. Sterling is used to playing against low blocks, basically, which is what Chelsea are presented with on a regular basis, particularly at Stamford Bridge. And again, working in tight areas, being able to break through those lines of defence. You know, it's not going to be a massive culture shock to him to turn up and realise that he hasn't got half a pitch to run into, like he did, say, in the Bundesliga, which again, referencing Werner. But I think it's such a stark example, particularly on that side of the pitch where you think Sterling may start for Chelsea if he signs. And just the productivity, I don't think you can argue against the amount of goals Sterling has scored. I think if we are talking, and I've seen, in response to some of my critique of current Chelsea players, I think there is a little bit of a contradiction and hypocrisy going on here where we're sort of turning our nose up at Sterling for some of the reasons I've listed already. But you'll see people adamantly defending their own players and their productivity and what maybe has gone wrong for them at Chelsea and trying to make excuses. I mean, this is a guy who's scored 10 plus goals in the Premier League for the past 5 seasons. His 13 last year would make him the highest scorer at Chelsea in the Premier League last season. So even in a season where maybe he wasn't the dominant player at Man City like he had been in previous years, still was scoring goals for Pep Guardiola, and important moments too throughout the season, particularly on the final day, creating I think Gundogan's goal, which was major in turning that game around. And as well for England, that's the thing people can't explain away. I think a lot of people try to explain away Sterling's goal scoring by saying, well, he just plays for Pep, right? And that's the reason he scores a lot of goals. Of course, that's a major factor in him becoming a better player. But those players still need to be in those positions to finish those chances. They still need to take those chances. And again, it reminds me a little bit of the Tammy debate we were having last year. I think if a player is consistently putting the ball in the back of the net, I think you just have to credit that they are quite productive players. And particularly at the Euros last summer, I think Sterling showed his ability outside of the City bubble to still be quite impactful. That anticipation inside the box, I think, as I praise Pulisic, I mean, I think Sterling's to another level, and he does have creative aspects to him as well. I think just calling him a poacher and a finisher, I think is a little bit silly and maybe just underrates him a little bit, particularly when listening to what City fans have to say about how important he is to elevate other players within their team. I think it shows that maybe the outside perspective on Sterling is maybe a little bit reductive at times, and you are actually getting a more rounded player than maybe we anticipate. And maybe that's why Chelsea and Tuchel are really interested in him. And it seems like the Chelsea interest in Sterling quite obviously has been there for a long time. So yeah, I think the productivity thing is big. A guy who's just consistently scored goals. And I again, Lukaku consistently scored goals and it didn't work out, did it? But I don't think you can just write that off as just a product of the system, because Pep isn't holding a PS5 controller. Players do need to take responsibility on the pitch, and this is a guy in Raheem Sterling who has faced adversity in his career. When he left Liverpool, he got a barrage of criticism for leaving that club, particularly in the way the media works in this country. He was particularly going to Man City as well. I think for his character to respond to that, the criticism he's received on the England stage as well, I think to respond to that and become kind of a leading figure last year at the Euros, there's something to be said about that. I mean, he is in the prime of his career. It can go both ways, right? We're buying a player, potentially buying a player at 27. Does he kind of see, after everything he's won at Man City, what is there left to achieve? Are you buying the most motivated player compared to, say, a 24, 25-year-old who's hungry to achieve things? Or are you buying the finished article who can instantly come in and have that end product because he knows how the league works? That can go both ways. I don't think this is the only attacking signing I'd like to see this summer. As I've continued to say, even though there's some doubts obviously about his injury record, Ousmane Dembele I still think would be. I think if you were to pair Ousmane Dembele with Raheem Sterling, if that was to be 2 attacking signings this summer, I think you'd have to be highly encouraged by that, because they're 2 players who, for their links, for their connections, for their versatility, for their ability to play in our system, I think you'd have to be encouraged by those 2 additions, particularly Dembele's creativity, which I think is the big thing I sort of elevate him in as a signing this summer, and that opportunity to potentially sign a player of his age, of his talent, sure has a red flag in fitness and injury, which is obviously a massive concern, and it always would be. But, Chelsea have bought players without those injury concerns. Again, we've gotten to a stage of our attack. I think people are rightly so confused about where do Chelsea go next. And there is a fear of signing anyone in that final third, because so much has gone wrong. So much hasn't worked out. But I think Chelsea just can't sit back and go, well, we can't do anything about it. As I say, I think there are things within the way we play. The lack of bravery and risk at times needs to be altered for Chelsea to actually improve. And maybe a change in formation, maybe a change for, behind the attack. I think in terms of the type of profiles we have in, say, central midfield and central defence, that really can make a difference and actually allow that attack to be a lot more free-flowing and really go at teams. Those are my opinions. As I say, I think that it doesn't seem as close as maybe Di Marzio was claiming it to be, but there quite clearly is optimism from Chelsea's side. Is this Sterling's camp maybe putting this into the media, and there could be a chance that he wants to stay at Man City, and that's how this eventually ends up? We don't know. There's been talk of Real Madrid being interested in him as well, so there could be foreign interest that comes in for Sterling. But Chelsea can't just sit and just allow what's been going on in recent years to continue. And some of that, not all of that, is signing players. You don't just want to sign players for the sake of it and be so instinctive and just pile on sort of the pressure and think we have to sign somebody. You want it to be the right profile because we've wasted so much money in that area. And as well, you have to factor in that there is other areas within our squad we need to invest in. I mean, despite our kind of expectation that Jules Koundé is going to sign, he hasn't signed yet. Despite our expectation that other players could arrive, they haven't arrived yet. There could be work going on behind the scenes, but let me know your opinions, because I know Sterling already is sort of dividing opinion, and people think that there are pros, there are cons. I've tried to lay them out in this video. I do lean more towards Sterling, I think, being a good addition, just simply because of what I've seen from him in the Premier League and for England. I think he is a very talented footballer, and I think that if the right things are in place and Chelsea, as I say, maybe do other bits of business and we are a lot more free-flowing next year and Tuchel does allow the team to maybe go at opponents a bit more, I think Sterling has proved himself a very productive player, and I think those stats just don't lie, particularly from a wide area. Again, maybe proven wrong, as I was with Lukaku last year. We'll wait and see. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.